Magic: The Gathering is a popular collectible card game where players cast spells and summon creatures as powerful mages called Planeswalkers, locked in a wizard's duel. It's been going strong for 24 years now, and this constantly evolving game has caught and kept the attention of players from their teen years well into adulthood. With over 16,000 cards existing and hundreds more added every year, there are almost infinite combinations that can make up a player's 60-card deck. But I'm not here to teach you Magic or ask you to play. I'm here to talk to you about the intellectual and interpersonal benefits of playing Magic: The Gathering. Magic is often called the brainchild of chess, Dungeons and Dragons, and poker, incorporating key elements of each to make a game based on strategy, fantasy, and luck. Each present learning opportunities for players, but combined can keep these students learning, interacting, and exploring a world of infinite possibilities. If Magic: The Gathering was introduced to school-age students, it would yield growth creatively, academically, and socially, because Magic's a game which forces its players to plan a strategy, read carefully, think mathematically, and interact on an intellectual level. It's the creative aspect of Magic that sets it and other collectible card games apart from video games and TV. Because of the construction and revision aspects of choosing cards for a deck, Magic promotes individuality and growth and the opportunity to reconstruct as you learn. The win goal of Magic is reducing your opponent's life total from 20 to 0, making its most basic mechanical state a battle of mathematics. Its vocabulary is as colorful and beautiful as its artwork, giving in-game context for names like Aven Skirmisher, Shambling Ghoul, and players' vocabularies will expand wildly in a game where you do the reading, the math, and compete with that knowledge. In 2009, an article called Magic: The Gathering as a Social and Educational Learning Tool, the author wrote that Magic is a sort of game where you can turn up to a store on your own, play in a tournament, and play a number of different people. You meet different people without the need for formal introduction, etiquette, or social construct. In 2012, a mother named Lydia wrote about taking her eldest son, an 8-year-old with Asperger's and a long list of behavioral issues, to a local card shop to play in a tournament. She wrote that as her son proves he could play, pretense of age meld away to mutual interest between peers. So let's jump right in, shall we? Let's step into your imagination. If you had magical powers, what would they be? How would you use them? Would you heal and protect, harnessing the powers of peace, law, structure, and equality? Or would you wield fire and burn your enemies away, feeding on freedom, emotion, impulse, and destruction? Would you rather play with the forces of nature and growth, guiding the earth, wildlife, spirituality, and tradition? Or harness death and decay, playing with plague, mortality, and darkness? Maybe you'd play with the minds of others and expand your own, exploring knowledge, deceit, cautiousness, and control. In the English language, there's no word like magic that is a better invitation to let your imagination off of its leash. The plains of magic, from the Gothic townships of Innistrad, plagued with vampires, werewolves, and horrors, to the great clockwork giants of the Kaladesh Inventors Fair, each new set tells a story and lays a setting, all this to provide a context in which all of these creatures and spells are possible. In fact, the setting of Magic and its planes fill the pages of 56 different Magic: The Gathering novels. Now that you have these themes and settings, it's for each player to decide what colors and cards they believe will most help them win. At first, players will pick what spells that they like thematically or artistically. This level of personal preference in construction is a driving element for many players, eventually recognizing relationships between cards, evaluating their merit versus their in-game cost. In Magic: The Gathering as a social and educational learning tool, the author states that this is a practice of critical, organizational, and divergent thinking skills. In a 1999 paper called The Mathematics of Magic, a study in probability, statistics, strategy, and game theory, the author states that this mechanic of construction is why the game can be enjoyed for decades, providing massive potential for customization and constant expansion. As the game itself evolves, it keeps its players doing the same. The function of construction also gives the opportunity for reconstruction. After a game, players' analysis of cards' effectiveness and weak points, and the ability to change and edit the deck as they learn is a constant creative process. This kind of self-reflection is always an opportunity for self-improvement in any field, the practice of which in this case can be tested and reevaluated again and again, challenging players to identify their own strengths and weaknesses and adjust to them. In 2017, an article called What Magic the Gathering Can Teach Us by Will Lutton explains that like chess, Magic the Gathering moves in a exchanging of turns, in which players can think ahead multiple turns, evaluating their own cards as well as what they know about their opponents to make decisions and formulate divergent strategies to adjust to variation. It is this kind of creative reasoning that teaches you to do the most with the tools at hand and to think on your feet. With a name like Magic, you can hardly expect the language to be dull. In 2010, an article by Reinhardt talks about a Kansas art teacher named Adam Clark who held an after-school Magic club. He states that the questions of what cards do often lead to a vocabulary lesson. Cards like Pacifism, Rampant Growth, and Stratus Walk all present learning opportunities for unfamiliar words with a spectrum of context clues. One of these context clues is a part called flavor text, which is italicized at the bottom. For example, Ricochet is a vampire creature whose flavor text read, "If you're not having fun, what's the point of living forever?" This secondary text gives, as its name implies, flavor, giving a card distinct personality and context within the fantasy world, as well as insight into the definition of the card and how it affects the game. One of my favorites is a card called Inspiration. Its flavor text is taken from the Journal of the Prime Is Magnus. It reads, "Day 31, I finally succeeded in time reversal experiment. Day 30, I might have a problem here." Saying there is math and magic sounds a lot like saying there is science in nature. According to Dan Eckstein, in a 2009 article called Magic in the Classroom, The Rule of Nine, like poker, Magic functions on randomly drawing cards off the top of the shuffled deck. Also like poker, you can only have 4 copies of any one specific card. This leads to the process of constructing a deck to translate into fractions and equate into probability of drawing the card you want. Lutton explains in What Magic Can Teach Us that creatures are a key piece of magic, and like players, they are measured in numbers. The ratio of power and toughness being how much damage they can deal and how much damage they can take. Once on the field, these numbers can be manipulated using additional spells. Combat is a part of the game which is centered on clashing these creatures against each other and making crucial decisions on who will collide with who. Players must compare their sizes of their own creatures with their opponents to evaluate their best move and the risks involved. At the top right of every card is a series of numbers called a converted mana cost. This is the cost to play the cards, using numbers and symbols to represent how much and what currency of mana is needed to play the card. Evaluating these costs and when you can play them is an exercise in resource management, and comparing these costs against the card's abilities is a practice in cost-effective reasoning, 2 highly useful skills in the real world. The biggest reason Magic has been successful for over 2 decades is its huge international community of players. In a collection of statistics, the author Teague compared research about how many people played Magic. Estimated in 2016, there landed somewhere between 15 to 21 million players worldwide. Card and hobby shops all over the world hold weekly games and tournaments, and the game is printed in 10 different languages. It is not hard to find new friends when you share an interest like Magic. Magic, like in so many myths, uh, has a long tradition of mentors and apprenticeships. In a research paper by Celine Turkey and contributors in 2012 called Collectible Card Games as Learning Tools, they found that when new to the game, players often learn via cognitive apprenticeship. As they see others use cards in relationship to each other, new mental pathways are formed. But unlike other games, this kind of learning never really stops. Players of all experience levels compete and often see new and creative uses for cards and learn from it. As the game itself evolves, so do the players. Lydia, the mother of the 8-year-old playing in the tournament, said that fantasy games like Dungeons and Dragons and Magic are well known as a safe place for freaks, geeks, nerds, and every other brand of socially awkward under the sun. As such, the environment of Magic has always been welcoming and inclusive to players of all creeds, ages, and experience levels, meeting many people and bonding over shared interest. In an age of smartphones and video games, it is the interpersonal aspect that really makes Magic stand out. Alright, this is where the collection part of collectible card games comes in. As a game of so many cards, players can still only use the ones they have, so they seek to expand their magical depths as they strive to collect more. Celine Turkey said in Collectible Card Games as Learning Tools, using cards as a reward system for winning games, good grades, or good behavior, parents and educators can use the reward system to leverage harder work in other areas. Driven by the promise of new cards and the potential competitive edge they may give. Collecting cards can even be an exercise in organization. Ownership creates a personal investment in the decks that they build from cards they own, and can form a sense of pride and intellectual ownership of the deck, making winning a game a much more personal triumph. So as you can see, if Magic the Gathering was introduced to a school-age student, it would yield growth creatively, academically, and socially, because Magic the game that asks its players to plan a strategy, read carefully, think mathematically, and interact on an intellectual level. Magic's power of constructing decks, as well as the ability to edit, provides players with practice in identifying weaknesses and strengths, as well as learning from and correcting them. Its fantasy flavor gives players opportunity to learn new words and use math to combat their opponents, while practicing important resource management skills. Doing all this while playing a social game that requires players to interact and encourages peers to teach each other along the way. Magic in its whole is a complex game that provides a fun and context to practice numbers and critical thinking skills, as well as develop social bonds between players. This game has survived for decades because it continues to grow and change just like the players. It is played by kids and adults alike because its beautiful artwork and colorful stories are surpassed only by the emphasis on individuality and creativity in the players themselves.